Vladimir Putin even has commented about the unfairness, so to speak, of the fact that we can print a dollar and we can buy the resources of the world, right? Because we have the privilege of the world reserve currency. We can make out of nothing something that then take the assets of the world, strip mine the assets of the world, in a sense. And it seems as though that era may be shifting, especially as the BRICS nations are looking to ways to do trade with one another outside of the dollar system. Again, the dollar's not going away, but how does that shift the world, and what does that do to the value of resources, let's say gold, that maybe China and Russia value it twice as much as we do? And so then what happens to the gold that you can actually get your hands on if the world, can buy twice as much oil over there as they can with our version of the price of gold? So you're still going to need to eat, and you're still going to need power, and you're still going to need a way to preserve the value of your life savings in an asset that can't be diluted and printed away.
Welcome to the Rose Show podcast. Welcome to the Rose Show, your ultimate independent source for achieving true wealth. Today, I speak with Kristine Cranely. She's an investment advisor representative, as well as founder of Noah's Bitcoin. She's a Bitcoin educator. And today she's going to enlighten us on Bitcoin for businesses, as well as investment opportunities in the Bitcoin space. We'll also be speaking about the multitude of benefits of Bitcoin mining and reducing costs for all taxpayers. Kristine is an integral part of the Texas Blockchain Council and instrumental in making Texas the #1 state in Bitcoin mining. We discover some key thinking behind Bitcoin and its decentralized nature, and how it encourages long-termism and the incentive to save for the future. Bear markets are for building. Subscribe to the channel and enable notifications to stay ahead of all the latest. Thanks, and enjoy the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here with Kristine Cranely. She is founder of Noah's Bitcoin education, and an investment advisor representative at PM Squared Financial. She's all about free markets, entrepreneurship, innovation, and Bitcoin. So how you doing today, Kristine?
I am doing great. It's such an honor to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to have you here today. You are instrumental in advancing education for Bitcoin and spreading awareness. So we love talking to you about all you've been up to. I love Noah's Bitcoin. It feels like I'm on Noah's Ark here in New York. It's been raining, I think, 40 days and 40 nights. It's been nonstop torrential rain. And so it's just been crazy. So how's Texas? Is it nice and warm and sunny down there?
Yeah, we're actually having a cold front because the high is only 95 this week. Oh. It's been over 100 for months and months on end. So I appreciate the reprieve.
Oh my gosh, so no fall weather down there yet?
Not yet, but it'll come. It'll come.
Definitely. Very nice. So there's some amazing news that just came out this week, I believe, that Texas is the leader in Bitcoin mining. I know you're in Texas, and you are an integral part of the Texas Blockchain Council, the TBC, and you've been working on advancing Bitcoin mining in your state. So what's going on down there in Texas and Bitcoin mining?
Well, yes, we're very proud of that. That was Foundry's numbers, and they came out and said that we were #1. Their numbers said that we had 28% of the hash rate, so the mining going on in the country. We've actually seen numbers that have more than that, 54%. Georgia used to be the top because of some nuclear mining that they were doing. So I don't know, how it's all recorded, but we are so proud that were doing all that in the state. And so much of it has to do with Lee Bratcher, the president of the Texas Blockchain Council, who has worked closely over the years with ERCOT, which is our grid or organization, the Electricity Reliability Council of Texas. So they manage the grid. And so Lee's been working with them and also working on putting forward legislation to help clarify things in the Bitcoin space so that all in all, one, the availability for cheap power, particularly with our deregulated grid. So we're able to have a free market for power prices. So when you're in a place that has, let's say, a lot of wind and solar that is not able to get to market when there's too much of it, then batteries can only take so much of it, and they can't bring that very far. And so sometimes the price of power goes negative. And so we're able to then bring the Bitcoin miners like a sponge to soak up the wasted energy so they have access to cheaper power, not just wind and solar, but stranded gas. We've got a lot of gas that can't get to market. And so just being able to incentivize build out in the state. So one of that is just cheap power, but the other factor in that is just the jurisdiction, how they look upon Bitcoin mining. And because Texas has been really working to help make it easier for interconnection process or, hooking up to the grid, getting permits and that kind of thing, we're so proud that it has drawn business for our state.
Absolutely. A big shout out to Lee Bratcher for sure with leading that. Amazing stuff going on down there. And, when we think of Texas, we always think of oil fields and, being at the center for all that. So I know that the Texas legislators do support the mining industry, and that is key as well. And the spreading education and awareness about the benefits, and there's a multitude of benefits, which we're going to go into. I always like to say it's great for the environment and your wallet. All the taxpayers, it helps reduce energy costs and helps create jobs in rural areas. So there's a win-win approach there. Now, Texas A&M, I believe that's your alma mater. They also had some great summit. What happened over there?
They did a workshop. So there is a group, the Blockchain and Energy Technology Consortium at Texas A&M, and some really forward-thinking professors in a lot of those different areas. So economics and computer science and electrical engineering. Dr. Leshe, Dr. Prasad, Anjeti Prasad, Karak Ray, whose wife actually works at Swan, so they're like a Bitcoin family. They put on just a workshop to showcase some of the research that they've been doing, because Texas A&M is ERCOT's go-to university for studying just grid-related stuff. And so at the Texas Blockchain Council, we've been so proud to partner with the Blockchain and Energy Consortium. We donated some mining computers for them so that they could do some of that research. So one of the things that particular workshop was about was the topic of, it's called low voltage ride through. So when there's a dip in power in the grid, how low can that power go before things shut off? And how do Bitcoin mining computers compare to other industries with staying on during the low voltage ride through? And so anyway, I'm a bit nerdy. I just found it so fascinating, the research going on and the ways that they're helping give us real world data about how Bitcoin mining is actually good and stabilizing for the grid.
Love that. Love that. And I think you said the key words right there, forward thinking.
Yeah.
And that's very important because we need to think different. We need solutions to our rising issues that we have in energy as well as our economics. So this is so important for us to be forward thinkers. I mean, you're definitely making significant progress there in the state of Texas. I know you said the hash rate's about 28.5% of the US Bitcoin mining, but it was only 8.4% a year ago. I mean, that's significant progress, over 3 times as much. So congrats to you guys down there. So Kristine, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your background to Bitcoin. How long have you been a Bitcoiner? Tell us about your journey.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a little late to the game, honestly.
Never
but
late. Never
I
late to the game.
I encountered Bitcoin in the very beginning of 2021. I think that the COVID time period, the lockdowns, it gave us a lot of time for reflection and study and learning new things. And prior, in a former life, when I graduated from Texas A&M University, I actually spent a number of years in New York City doing nonprofit work, assisting women that found themselves in crisis pregnancies. And a lot of those women that I had the privilege of getting to know, a lot of them wanted to give birth to their child, but they felt like it was impossible because the father was pressuring them, the family was pressuring them, they were getting kicked out. And it was just heartbreaking to see that finances became a bit of a matter of life and death. Like they had something that they wanted, but they didn't see how they were going to be able to make it work because of money. And so it just really made me think about financial freedom that comes from learning about economics. And I mean, I don't know about you, I had fantastic parents, but they didn't really take time to teach me about finances so much, right? They just figured that I'd get married and my husband would do that. And I think that's a typical experience for many women of our age. And so I'm very self-taught, I suppose. So in 2021, I was doing commercial property management in Washington, D.C., and our building shut down because of the pandemic. So I had an opportunity to flee back to my home state of Texas and to remake myself. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be talking about Bitcoin because I'm one of these people, I can't not talk about what I'm excited about. And just the whole idea of a fixed supply, something that's peer-to-peer, that it's censorship resistant, it's trustless, all these problems that we're having in our macroeconomic environment because of the centralization, the over leveraging, the inflation of the money supply, all the things that Bitcoin provided such an elegant solution for. And with an eye toward the fact that with so much expansion of the money supply, it was inevitable that we were going to start feeling inflation more and more. And so I started an LLC called Noah's Bitcoin in honor of Noah's Ark, right? This idea of a flood of inflation is coming and, is a cap supply, an asset that has a cap supply, could that act as a hedge against inflation? So that was kind of the idea when I created the LLC. Also, I mean, just a disclaimer, none of this is financial advice and just educational purposes. But that was what that entity was for, was just to talk to anyone who'd listen. What is it? What's the investment thesis for it? What do you need to know about taking it into your own possession? That kind of thing. So I made a video and I got a couple calls to teach, especially a group of realtors were interested, and my dentist had a group of people at his country club that wanted to hear about it. And so along the way, as I was just teaching about it, a registered investment advisor firm here in Texas, which was one of only 5 in the state that allow actual cryptocurrency exposure for their clients, heard of one of the talks I gave and called me up and invited me to consider sitting for my Series 65 and joining his team at our small registered investment advisor firm, PM Squared Financial. So that I've been focused on that for the last 2 years is when I came on to the PM Squared team. And we are a full service RIA, although we recently sold our book of sales for stocks and bonds. We still have the capability of getting our clients exposure to the actual Bitcoin asset, let's say in their IRAs through equity trust, self-directed IRA. But it's one thing if it's in an IRA, but for most people, holding it themselves is going to be much cheaper than putting it under management. But we do have, more wealthy clients that just want a little bit of exposure and they don't want the responsibility of holding it themselves. So we do offer that, but primarily what I've been focused on is we have had the privilege of being one of the first investors in Giga Energy. They're a stranded natural gas Bitcoin mining company. So they're Aggies as well from Texas, and they will go out to the oil field and bring a generator and a data box and start monetizing energy that was normally thrown away. And so we're kind of a family office light kind of feel. And so I mostly just educate some of our potential investors who are interested in investing in some of our private equity stuff around the Bitcoin space. What is it? What's the things to be careful of? What's the things to know about Bitcoin as an asset class? And just kind of help them understand the dynamics of what the investment would be about. And obviously the private equity stuff is for the accredited investors. But mostly I spend my time teaching around that.
Very nice. So an investment advisor representative, and you work with one of the few that also holds digital assets. That's so cool. So do you have clients that you advise with asset allocation, or are you mostly focused in the educational side of digital assets and blockchain and Bitcoin?
The CEO of our firm, he does a lot of the advising because he's worked at family offices himself. And so when we talk about Bitcoin, obviously you need to figure out what someone's risk tolerance is, what their goals are regarding retirement and all that. Obviously you never want to be overweighted in a volatile asset like that. And so we do make it, it's part of our fiduciary responsibility to look at the whole picture and then help them understand if they want to invest in Bitcoin. Obviously I'm invested in Bitcoin and our firm is, so with the appropriate disclosures, helping them, look at the more broad portfolio and working together with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Very nice. So regarding asset allocation, what are some thoughts? Of course, this isn't financial advice for anyone, but I love the discussion of asset allocation across many diverse asset classes. What are your thoughts on the various asset classes for portfolios? If you could share with us your thoughts on the market as well, because that's a big one. The equities are always known as so sexy. Everyone loves talking about equities. If you could just speak your thoughts across asset classes, it would be great.
Well, I want to start by just emphasizing how much we don't know with this environment. We're in a very strange environment right now. Up until this time, it's all been right up and to the right for years and years and years. So most asset advisors have not experienced a recession. And we're seeing the market is so irrational. Like at times when you think people would be rushing to gold or silver or Bitcoin, sometimes you see it come crashing down and everybody seems to be guessing wrong. And so, diversification is important, but also to be thinking about during times of recession, if that's indeed where we're going. You've got to be looking at scarce assets that you can't print more of, scarce desirable, right? And so to be aware of, commercial real estate, that was something I was in before, but now with the interest rates so high and the amount of people working at the office greatly reduced and, the refinancing, I personally am concerned that there's still a world of hurt out there with the way that we've traditionally invested to be aware of. And I'm the first to acknowledge, I'm newer to the space, and so I'm not going to say what's going to happen, but it's one of the reasons why I think it's important for people to be looking at assets outside of the traditional stock bond portfolio. Obviously, you never want to be extreme on anything, right? You don't want 100% of your net worth or even 50%. But even if you just start with 2%, 5% allocation to something like Bitcoin, something like gold and silver, not the paper markets, but actually the asset, getting a hold of it. It's something that is not something you can't print away. And I think with the, sorry, this is kind of a long-winded answer, but when you look at what's going on around the world, if you look at what's happening with the BRICS nation and the expressed desire by many countries to move away from the dollar hegemony, I think that the dollar is still going to be with us. It's not like it's just going to go away tomorrow, but at the same time, people are looking at other ways to purchase their energy needs. And so because of that, I think that in addition to typical stocks and bonds percentages, you need to be looking at assets that are outside of that system. And that's one of the reasons that I personally like gold and silver too. I like silver because it's not only a monetary metal, but it's something that is needed in production. So it's an industry metal, and the price has been so low for so long. I suspect that there's not nearly as much out there for purchase as people might suspect. So anyway, I say that again, not to advise you to go out and buy silver, but just the different investments that are outside the system. And then Bitcoin, of course, it has that property of not being able to be duplicated and inflated, but it's also recognized around the world. It's easy to send. I was watching a little video the other day about a reporter that sent a refugee in Poland from Ukraine, sent her $25 worth of Bitcoin, and she was at a ATM station at the time. So within 25 minutes, she had her $25 sent to her, just with the ease of Bitcoin. So to answer your question, to go backwards, I think that we are in interesting days that we haven't seen before. And we need to be looking at allocations that include some of these more fixed resources, assets, commodities too is something that I think is important to look at right now, because the thing is, cheap energy is essential to a flourishing economy, right? You're never not going to need energy. And so looking at those kind of things, what are the asset classes that people can do without? I think that travel has been suffering quite a bit and may continue to if people's bank accounts are hurting, but you're still going to need to eat, and you're still going to need power, and you're still going to need a way to preserve the value of your life savings in an asset that can't be diluted and printed away. And sorry, just one last comment. When you're looking at what's going on in the world, figures like Vladimir Putin even has commented about the unfairness, so to speak, of the fact that we can print $1 and we can buy the resources of the world, right? Because we have the privilege of the world reserve currency. We can make out of nothing something that then take the assets of the world, strip mine the assets of the world, in a sense. And it seems as though that era may be shifting, especially as the BRICS nations are looking to ways to do trade with one another outside of the dollar system. Again, the dollar's not going away, but how does that shift the world, and what does that do to the value of resources, let's say gold, that maybe China and Russia value it twice as much as we do? And so then what happens to the gold that you can actually get your hands on if the world, can buy twice as much oil over there as they can with with our version of the price of gold? So that's not really an answer about how to structure your portfolio, but it's things to keep in mind and things you want to be talking to a financial advisor like yourself, who's aware of those dynamics when you're looking at your personal allocation and your goals, your retirement goals, and how quickly you want to be retired and work optional.
Thank you so much for that great overview, because economics is central to all of this and to everything that's going on, and will also affect our decision making with our asset allocation. And it's so important to know your risk tolerance, and everyone has their own individual styles. However, the undercurrent is the same for all. Money affects our perception of all of our decision making in our system that we have. It's based on a Keynesian economics, and it tends to encourage short-termism over the long-termism, because of that feeling that your money is inflated, as inflation, and it's losing its value. So you don't have that incentive to save for the future, because you inherently feel that it's going to be worth less. So you tend to consume more nowadays.
Right.
So I think, right. And I think that Bitcoin having a finite supply, 21 million, it actually encourages people to save. It changes your decision making. And there's not much of that. There's not that debt incentive to take on debt, because that's another thing. Like Safedine Amous said, great economist, that what it happens is that we have inflation. And the only way to overcome that is to take on that debt. We are incentivized to take on debt, right?
Yep.
In order to help minimize that inflation that we have for the savers, for the people who don't take on debt. So you're incentivized to take on debt to overcome that. So there's a lot of those mental issues. And so there is a need for real assets. And like you said, scarce assets. And I do believe we're in a commodities secular bull market, and it's changed. And I think we're in that kind of market now, and there's a return to real assets. And we're in a different time period on many levels. And the past 15 years or so since the GFC, we've had negative rates, easy money, and very easy, loosened monetary policy. And look where it's led us now. We had that final COVID mass stimulus programs, massive money printing, increase in the money supply, which directly affects inflation. Money, and inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. And that was Milton Friedman who said that. And it's ever more apparent right now from what we're at. Debt to GDP is over 120% and rising. We have massive debt, 33 trillion, and Fitch downgrade. We're getting downgraded, interest expense is even higher, about 1 trillion. And so lot of issues there, different time period. And you said it so well, how you touched upon so many different parts of that. And, I think that we're in for higher for longer, which means not necessarily much higher, but a longer time period. Margins are compressed, higher cost of debt and capital, and we have a need for lower costs and lower energy costs for the basic necessities. And so Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin, and we need to forward think. We need to think of different ways to be more efficient and to innovate. And those go hand in hand. Those are the keys to the future. So our risk perception has changed, and I think we're going to notice that there's going to be a continued rise in bankruptcies, and a lot of the zombification and malinvestments are going to come to fruition. So many people have recency bias, and like you said, you pointed out so nicely, Kristine, was that people are not familiar with these type of recessions that we are going to have in the near future. And it looks very likely that next year, even though it's an election year and it tends to be more of a bull market leading up to the election, I think it's the second half, it's like the 2 years leading to the US election tends to be upward with the market, versus the 2 years after the election tends to be more downward. That's just historical patterns. I think we will be in for some tougher times. And so we need to be prepared. And, you're not a latecomer to Bitcoin at all. I think that even now is a good time for people to start opening up and thinking differently about this great asset class. And Hafa Zaguri, the CIO of Swan, was on here, and he made a great point. He said that all these asset classes are tied to the dollar. They're all tied. So they're technically all moving in the same direction, because as you devalue the currency, they're all moving in that direction, while Bitcoin, on the other hand, is non-correlated and appears to be the best asymmetrical risk profile out there. So so many great points there. I wanted to talk about, because you're such a great educator, you are a crusader for Bitcoin education, and admire all your hard work, Kristine. Tell everyone, because this is the key, the point of this podcast is to enlighten and to educate and spread awareness. How do you see Bitcoin as central to free markets, entrepreneurship, and innovation?
Oh my goodness. You know, we talk about going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Come for the gains, stay for the revolution. And for many of us that got in at 2021, you know, our portfolio is down. And so I'll be the first to admit, you know, I have no idea what the price action is going to do in the short term, but there's so much about this technology that incentivize it. It's amazing how truly free market, because, you know, Bitcoin cannot be controlled. It can't be censored. It can't be stopped. And so the more that you study it, I guess the more you see what a surprising black swan solution it seems to offer to the world. Gosh, there's so many different ways that I could answer that. One of the things that I love the most about Bitcoin, and it kind of goes to my past too, I have a heart for justice, you know, for people, you know, being able to live a fully flourishing life. And so having the privilege of earning my living in the world reserve currency, I often have to take a step back and look at the promise that Bitcoin brings for people that are not earning in the US dollar, because I think that shows the most beautiful example of the promise that it holds. I mean, you look at a country like El Salvador that, you know, made the statement, they use the dollar, but they say, we don't have any control over the monetary policy of the United States, or, you know, the things we spend our money on, but we're experiencing the inflation as well. So we are going to adopt Bitcoin as well as legal tender. So now you have a country who a lot of their GDP is from remittances, right? People sending money from, let's say, the US to El Salvador. Well, in the past, you wire that money through Western Union, they take a huge cut of it, and then your family member has to travel to a bank, because a lot of the people are unbanked, and maybe the cartel is camped out around that bank. They got to get in and out with their dollars and make it home. Now, instant and practically free because of the Lightning Network. They are able to receive that value. If they need to transform it into dollars, they can. But the middleman is cut out. And also, you look at countries, again, I focus a lot on the Bitcoin mining world just because of my work. So countries in Africa where they don't have the money to build out the infrastructure for power. So many of those communities have no power. And there's not investors that are going to spend the money to bring the wiring into those communities. So there's a project called Gridless, and what they're doing is they're taking their hydro, their water resources, maybe solar if they have the solar panels, and they are mining Bitcoin with it to generate money. And then they're using that money to build out these mini grid infrastructures. And so what Bitcoin enables is, especially through Bitcoin mining, as we said earlier, it's location agnostic, right? So it is able to go anywhere in the world where there's power that's stranded, right? There's resources that can't make it to market. Well, now Bitcoin can go there and soak up those stranded resources and bring economy to a community. I saw another video just the other day of Bitcoin Lake in South America, and they are using, I think it's Guatemala, I can't remember. Some of the people there are using used vegetable cooking oil, and they're mining Bitcoin with it instead of throwing it away. And so there's so much about this technology that incentivizes ingenuity, creativity, entrepreneurial spirits. Anybody can participate in Bitcoin. It's permissionless. And so I think that those features are really what become a catalyst for growth and flourishing, because nobody's left out. Like I said, it's permissionless. You don't have to ask permission. You don't have to have friends in Washington, to participate in the system. If you can find cheap power, or even you just want to invest a little bit into it and have an asset that can grow during times of monetary expansion. Because we both know that when there's times of inflation, the money that's printed flows into the assets. So the wealthy, if you $1, you can invest for less than $1. So just the whole idea of financial inclusion, I believe that the more that you can empower everyone, the more that they are enabled to bring their unique gift to the community, to the economy, and flourish all.
I love that. That was so beautifully said, Kristine. It's about elevating humanity. And there's a huge disparity in wealth levels, especially recently. There's been a K-shaped recovery and domestically, but like you said, globally. And a lot of times it's very difficult for people to really just if you just stop and think about the disparity and wealth levels in other countries, it's so disheartening, and we need to find solutions to close that gap. We need to reduce those barriers to entry and open up those borders and allow everyone the opportunity. And Bitcoin is being so decentralized, and it empowers everyone and gives everyone that opportunity. And you minimize the middle people and having that, intermediary having to facilitate those transactions. And, you have Lightning Payment Network, which is amazing, instant. You have it on layer 2 or base level if you do the open address, I think it's called, but for larger transactions. But amazing points there, because that's exactly what it is. It's the heart of innovation for the future, and it's much needed. We need something different because the system currently isn't working. And I know a lot of people use the term, the money is broken. And there was a great book written by Lynn Alden. She's fantastic. And it's exactly it. The money is broken. And I think it's becoming increasingly more apparent of that. I do believe the US dollar will probably remain the global reserve currency for some time due to its liquidity and stability. And the most important point of that is that there's no real contender. In order to be dethroned as a GRC, there needs to be a solid contender. The euro, the yuan, no, I don't think so right now. So that's the point. However, global reserve asset, I think, is much needed. And I think Bitcoin has the potential for that. And I think we will notice and see that in time. Yeah, absolutely. So
it's such an important point. There's a difference between the global reserve currency and a global reserve asset, which would traditionally be treasuries, right? And so the fact that, like, let's say someone, again, going back to the human rights aspect of it, the financial inclusion. So the countries in Africa that are under the CNA, so the French franc, they don't have the same access to a dollar that I have, right? If they want to turn their currency into a dollar, they've got to trade it out for the franc, the euro, right? And they lose a tremendous amount of the value in that trade, right? And then the trade from the euro to the dollar. And so because of the fact of where they were born and where they live, they don't have the same access
Yes.
that I have. But their Bitcoin is worth the same purchasing power as my Bitcoin. And so I think that there's a right pushback against the Bitcoin community when we're like, well, we just want to replace the dollar. Well, the dollar is not going away, and the dollar is served, I think, by having such a pristine asset that then you can use on a balance sheet, right, in order to back the same way that treasuries have. But the problem that we're having with treasuries lately is interest rate risk, right? And so as all these treasuries are rolling over, and the banks, this is what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, is they had treasuries, they had the most pristine asset on their balance sheet, but now those treasuries, now that you can get them for a higher interest rate, we all know this, right? The value of them goes down. And so when you mark to market, they have lost a tremendous amount of money on that. And that's not, so Bitcoin, is it volatile compared to the dollar? Yes. And is the dollar going to remain strong? I think yes. I think it may be going a lot stronger, and so you have to be aware of that when you're investing in Bitcoin. You don't want to put next month's rent money, but what you have is, as a complement, an asset that can't be expanded through printing, and it enables you. I like to think of the story of the Bitcoin pizza, right? The guy that bought the first purchase with Bitcoin was 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. Well, how much was that worth? Is that worth now, right? And that's why most Bitcoiners, they don't want to use it as a currency, right? They're like, I'm not spending my Bitcoin. I'm not spending it on a Tesla, because I could probably buy 10 Teslas, hopefully. No promises, but if it goes up. And so, yeah, I think that's a really important point about, we're not talking about replacing the dollar at this point. We don't, we're not advocating for that, but along with the dollar, the importance of having a reserve, having an asset that is capped in supply and scarce and desirable.
Exactly right. It's that incorruptible, immutable nature that can't be tampered with, proof of work, and just a beautiful asset class in itself, well designed, and just a work of art. Just so beautiful. I love when Michael Saylor tweets, or whatever you call it, X, the platform formerly known as tweeting, puts out, right? I feel like we're talking about Prince, the artist formerly known as Prince. Remember that from the 90s? And yeah, so he's always, our age, right? He's always tweeting. I'm going to just say tweeting because it's easier. Beautiful artwork. Bitcoin artwork, and he always says that, and it just makes me think of how beautiful the science, the thermodynamics behind Bitcoin, and its economic energy in its purest sense. And it's a new thing, and I think just like new technologies that emerge over time, people are always hesitant at first, and they're a little weary, and they have full right to be. I understand that, but that's what we are here to do, is to spread the awareness. And like you said, we're not saying to put all your money in Bitcoin. Absolutely not. We're not giving financial advice. But I believe for myself, it's important to have, some portion of the asset allocation allocated to Bitcoin, because it has that finite supply and can't be corrupted. And that's so important. Absolutely. And I do believe there's an importance to talk about a circular economy. And I've spoken about this before, about GDP and how, is it really a well-being indicator? I don't think so. I think there's so many other variables, and we're in a post-growth world where we are actually should give credit to people who can reuse and recycle, and not necessarily create new goods and services, but reuse things and keep things in a more circular economy and environment. And I think that's important as well. We need to conserve on many levels. And so, and that involves saving as well. And what is true saving if the item that you're saving keeps devaluing? It's an incessant quest to keep growing. And I think Michael Saylor and Safadine said that our inflation rates in the US is about 7% a year. That accounts for all the mass, increase in debt, because we have to remember, what is debt? Debt is a reduction in our future expected earnings, because as taxpayers, we need to pay that debt. So that debt affects all of us. So we account for that. The government keeps spending to no end. The debt is just increasing. So we need to account for all that. So there's an incessant quest to keep growing, because that supply is getting increased and the value is going down. And that's what I love having this discussion with you. We're both, I'm in the process of investment advisory with my firm. And so we're both had that Series 65 that we took, and we have that background, and we, can talk from that and seeing Bitcoin as an asset class. And I love talking with you about that. You're so awesome, Kristine. You're so bright. You're so brilliant at what you do. And you're so genuine in sharing your education of Bitcoin, which is so important to do that. So I want to talk about Bitcoin mining. Okay. I know that's one of your focuses, and I love it. We had Dennis Porter on, I think 2 weeks ago, and we talked about the multitude of benefits, and it's a win-win. And I think legislators need to know more about that. And like I said before, it's great for the environment and people's wallets. So let's go right into the large flexible loads and the demand response of Bitcoin mining, how it can provide seamless energy supply and reduce the stranded energy and the wasted energy.
Yes. Oh my goodness. One of my favorite topics. And this does speak a little bit to what you were talking about with the circular economy.
Yes.
When we don't pick winners and losers, right, then it incentivizes creativity. And again, like with Bitcoin mining, the one with the cheapest cost of energy wins. And so there's so many avenues to power your mining in a way that basically rescues stranded resources and brings them to the world without really a transportation cost. So many things about Bitcoin mining. So you mentioned large flexible load. So what that means, a load, putting on my little teacher cap, right?
Yes,
so a load is just a taker of power, right? And so a hospital might be a load on the grid. Bitcoin miners are a load on the grid. So several different, retail homes are a load on the grid. So Bitcoin mine are considered in a special category in Texas a large flexible load. Flexible because you can shut off the power in an instant and return that load back to the grid when there's a time of emergency. Now, in Texas, everybody heard the story about when our power went out. I think it was right before I got to town. I think it was in 2021. But that was before a lot of the miners had come to Texas. And so infrastructure is built out when there is a price, like there is money for it, right? So people wanting to buy more power incentivizes infrastructure build out. Like we were talking about in Africa, there was no money coming in to build power structures for those communities. So in Texas, we have all these stranded resources that, like with wind and solar, a lot of times they're not profitable without the incentives that are coming from the government for that. And so because of that, sometimes you get a negative price of power because they're being paid to produce wind and solar, but they can't get it to market. And so that's one of the areas that Bitcoin miners go out there and soak that up. But when we're talking about grid power, so miners that are actually plugged into the grid, they, and from whatever power sources, right? Wind, solar, natural gas, they register in Texas. They're required to register in Texas as a large flexible load so that when there's those times of emergency, they shut off and return power back to the grid. So we had in the next winter storm, I wish I had, if you go to the Texas Blockchain Council website under Bitcoin mining, you can see. But there's several reasons why Bitcoin miners would be incentivized to turn off. And there's a little bit of misinformation about this topic. So I want to just clear up when they get paid to shut off. So one, our grid needs to stay at a particular level. It's 60 hertz in order to be stable. We were talking earlier about the ride through, low ride through, like you don't want it unstable because it shuts down. So ERCOT pays flexible loads to be available to turn off when or turn on according to their needs, because they need to keep the grid stable at 60 hertz. So they're saying, okay, who wants to be available to be on when we say be on and be off when we say be off? Now the Bitcoin miners are bidding for those services, and they're bidding down some of the legacy companies because Bitcoin miners can turn off quicker than anyone else, and it doesn't really hurt their ROI, you know. Yeah, they're not mining at that time, but if they become a part of this service, they're being paid to offer that. And so so some Bitcoin miners become part of the ancillary services, and they're paid to shut off or they're paid to turn on. So that's one way you can get reimbursed for that. Number two, most miners are going to hedge their cost of power. So they're going to purchase a power price. So maybe they get power at 4.5 cents a kilowatt hour. But because Texas is deregulated, the price of power is going to go up in times of emergency because there's not enough to go around. And so then those companies that have a hedged price of power, they can shut off and sell that power back to the grid and make money on the spread, you know, between what it's sold for. Maybe they get credits, maybe they get paid. And so that's number two. So Texas isn't paying them, but they're offering up their power, which they got at a low price to be sold. And because they're offering it up, it is going to bring the price of power down, not up, because now there's more available to be purchased. Third, if you have not hedged your price of power and you're on the grid, well, when the cost of power goes screaming up, you're going to shut off your machines. Just it's economic demand response, right? Because you are going to be spending way too much money. If you're worried about getting a return on investment, you're going to shut off. So because of those three things, our grid in Texas is growing because we have more and more miners coming online, asking for power. And so then we have more and more flexible loads in Texas. So during a time of emergency, when all those flexible loads go down, you have that much more power available to serve in the times of emergency. And so those are some of the reasons why Bitcoin mining is not only strengthening the grid, it's helping keep it stable, it's making it more robust, but it's also driving down the cost of power for Texans because of the ancillary services. They're outbidding, you know, they're underbidding the more legacy services that can't shut off so quickly, and making power available in times when the price is spiking.
Love that rundown. So I think it's so important for people to understand that. Now, Bitcoin miners can adjust their power consumption. That's another beautiful part of that. And I love how you made it that it's like an energy marketplace. They can buy low and sell high and vice versa. And it's like a whole exchange that goes on. I think most people aren't aware of that. And it works hand in hand and with the grid. And it allows more of a seamless, more of a smoothing out of the energy needed. So you don't have those huge spikes, and then you have these rolling blackouts that occur, and they had that happen in California not too long ago. So, and it ends up being what bothers me the most is that wasted energy. And then they have blackouts. So, and because Bitcoin mining requires constant energy, they can purchase that energy as well. So it's all just a beautiful machine that works, and great stuff. Love that.
Well, and when you're talking about wind and solar, so there's a problem called the duck curve problem. So if you imagine a duck, right, the head and then the tail, when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing, there's a lot of power,
I like it.
right? And then when the sun goes down and the wind stops blowing, there's not enough. And so again, with with Bitcoin miners incentivizing, they become the buyers of last resort, where they can buy up that, super peaked time, and they can shut off, when there's not enough. So there's that. But then there's also in Texas, in anywhere, whenever you drill for oil, we talk about oil, gas, nuclear as dispatchable load, meaning it's always there. So wind and solar are not always there when you need them, but you're going to need dispatchable load to fill in those times when wind and solar are not online. And so it's really in our interest to continue to, until we're at a place where maybe we have nuclear, where it's constant, and we've got enough power, we're going to need oil and gas, until such time as we have a solution where we have power at every moment, that's making the power cheap enough for everyone. And so when you're drilling for oil, natural gas is a byproduct. And if you don't have pipeline to built out in your direction to sell it to the grid, then it becomes a waste product. And so that's why you see all the flaring. And the problem with flaring is, it only gets rid of about 91% of the methane. So there's still methane being emitted when you burn it, because it doesn't all get burned off. And so Bitcoin mining is able to go out to those stranded places and become another source of revenue for those oil fields. Granted, it's not huge, so maybe they're paying $1 an MCF, but it's cheaper than burning it. And again, turning that wasted power then into computational power to safeguard the most secure monetary network that ever existed. So anyway, there's so many different ways where it's such a win-win for everyone, right? It's helping in some of these small rural areas, whether we're talking about stranded gas or gas that's on grid, power that's on grid. We're rebuilding communities, right? By bringing these mines out there and becoming some of the biggest sources of revenue for that little community.
Absolutely. Creating jobs in rural areas. When I heard that, I was like, wow, that's much needed. Pure win-win approach there at the core. Monetizing wasted energy is another excellent point there. I think that's so important as well. We don't want to waste anything. We're in a new phase of the world, like we've been discussing, and it's about efficiency, and we need to be more efficient. Margins are compressed across the board, and they're only going to get more so as the cost of money goes up, and money affects everything. So, and we want to, and I always like to tell people, how does this affect you? And that's important because people need to know how it affects them. And it's reducing costs of electricity for taxpayers. And that's the most important takeaway, how it affects all of us. No matter where you live or are located, you're able to reduce costs, and that everyone needs and wants. So very important. And cutting methane emissions from landfills and farms is another great point. And cleaning up orphaned oil wells. And I'm sure Texas has plenty of those throughout. So that's another important point. And we had an energy expert on the show, Dr. Anas Alhaji, who mentioned about fossil fuels and says they're not going away anytime soon. And that's the harsh reality of that. So being able to do that and work together with Bitcoin mining is so important. It also does incentivize renewable energy generation. And like you said, wind and solar isn't always available, but it's able to work seamlessly with that as well. Just win-win across the board. So tell us about the demand for Bitcoin mining in Texas. I saw some charts that said the demand has increased significantly. Tell us about that trajectory that you're seeing.
Well, I think all over the world, if you look at the hash rate chart, so I'm sure most of your viewers already know, but what Bitcoin miners are doing is they're using a hashing algorithm, right, SHA-256, to basically search to find an output that starts with a certain amount of zeros so that it gets included in the block, right? So whenever we talk about Bitcoin miners being on, we talk about it as hashing. And so you can look up the worldwide hash rate of the network, how many hashes per second, how many guesses per second the Bitcoin mining network is doing. And lately we have been up around 450 exahashes, which is basically a quintillion hashes per second around the world. And so we have heard Oman, the country, announce that they're going to be mining Bitcoin. And, you know, I've had conversations with people in oil and gas. They're all looking at it. They're just not talking about it. And so even though you have Oman announcing it, and you got El Salvador mining, you know, with their volcano bonds and kind of crowdfunding their country that way, which I love. Basically, long story short, is everywhere the power is coming online. And the way that the Bitcoin network works is it adjusts the difficulty so that no matter how many computers are mining, it only wants a new block about every 10 minutes. So it's going to make it harder and harder to find that more and more zeros on the hash in order to fit in the block. And so what that means is you've got to be more and more creative in the power that you get, that it's cheaper and cheaper in order to stay solvent. Otherwise, you're not going to make it, because you're going to have to be working harder and harder and harder to produce that Bitcoin. So because Texas is deregulated, we do have these pockets of energy, wasted energy, whether that be stranded gas, whether that be an oversupply of wind and solar. And we also recently, thanks to the work of the Texas Blockchain Council and some of our miners like Brent Whitehead of Giga Energy and Griffin Habe of Mountain Lion, they put forth a new law that was just signed into law, where if a oil field is mining Bitcoin with their stranded gas, they don't have to pay severance tax. So severance is, you know, means separation. If ever you're going to take minerals out of the ground of your state and sell them elsewhere, you have to pay severance tax, separation tax. But now in Texas, we've clarified that if you're mining Bitcoin with that gas that used to be flared, because you don't have to pay severance tax if you're burning it, but if you're using it, right, is that severance tax applicable? And so now we have said in Texas, no, if you are mining within 1,000 feet of the wellhead, you don't have to pay severance tax. So for all those reasons, air permitting time being quicker, cheap energy, good regulation environment, no severance tax, it's drawing people in this like digital gold rush. Everybody's looking for ways to get online to mine Bitcoin. And so Texas has been a draw for those reasons.
Yes, Dennis Porter mentioned that, how there's a lot of competition in the Bitcoin mining business, as there's plenty of them. Are you noticing that as well, that there are a lot of businesses in the Bitcoin mining and it's growing significantly?
Yes, so I have been around for a bit of a cycle now, since 2021. So I've seen both. So we had a lot of people rushing into mining back when it was going up in 2021. They became over leveraged. They paid way too much for their computers. And a lot of them were wiped out and went bankrupt. Because one thing to know about Bitcoin mining computers, there's a bit of a duopoly. So whether it's WhatsMiner or Bitmain, those are the two companies that make Bitcoin ASICs mining computers. Because it's such a small, there's not a whole lot of competition in pricing. And so when the market is going screaming up, the price of those computers skyrockets. So maybe $10,000 a machine, $15,000 a machine. But then now, because we've been in a bear market for so long and so many people got liquidated and wiped out, they were over leveraged, they had to sell their computers at a fire sale. Now you can get a mining machine probably for about 2,000, right? So 5 times less than before. And so now we always like to say the bear market is for building, because you're going to have, you know, your overhead is going to be less. You still need to find the cheap power, but now you have the cheap equipment to do it with. And so it's interesting because when the narrative changes and there's a FOMO, right? A fear of missing out, and everybody is hearing about Bitcoin on the news. And this is what they were doing in 2021. Oh, it's going to be $2,000 by the end, 200,000 by the end of the year. You got a lot of people rushing in. But now what I think is happening is there are companies coming online, but they're companies that understand and they can see where this is going, despite maybe a fearful narrative out there about whatever, it being shut down. So yes, to answer your question, there is a lot of building going on, and a lot of it is being done quietly. Yeah, behind the scenes.
Absolutely. You building quietly during the bear market. I always say the same thing as well. Bear markets are for building, whether it's in the traditional financial world, in the economic, in the business world. Our business grew significantly during the 2008, 2009 time period. As others were folding, we were able to scale, and vertically and horizontally integrate with our manufacturing business. And because of that bear market, we were able to be where we are today. So I learned from experience, and, I always say the same thing, it's time for building and growing. Even if you don't have the resources to build, you can grow your intellect and your learning, and a great time to learn. And like you said, during COVID, which was a mini little bear market there, recession time period, we had a brief, but it was a great time for you to learn about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. So whether you can build externally or just build internally, and these are great times for that. So, and watching podcasts is a great way to learn as well. So we hope to enlighten so many excellent points that you bring up there. I want to ask you, do you think that the Bitcoin mining companies of today could be the future electric power companies of tomorrow?
That is a great question. There is such a synergy between power and mining. And a lot of the miners are kind of coming into the power infrastructure business. So for instance, I mentioned that we do private equity investments around stranded gas.
Yes.
And so we've invested in the holding company of Giga Energy, but we also have done Bitcoin denominated returns. So we buy the ASIC computers and the data box and the generators, and then we just give our investors their pro rata share of Bitcoin. But we have also been doing hosting agreements or hosting arrangements. So basically, we bring the generator and the box to hold the computers, and we're basically building out the power infrastructure that then the miners come in and lease from us. And so we may be mining at 2 cents a kilowatt hour, and they may be paying 7 cents a kilowatt hour. And then our investors are making money on the spread between what we provide the power infrastructure for and what we're paid for it. And those contracts are usually 1-year contracts. So if the price of power is going up, now we have projects that we do it on stranded gas. We've also have a project that we're about to build out that's actually on grid. So we have a fixed price of power, and so I'm seeing this a lot with the Bitcoin miners is they're becoming power providers. And I think the more that people understand Bitcoin as a hedge, as a service, I think that it won't obviously replace power infrastructure, but there's a place for it everywhere, because there's always going to be take a step back. I have a friend who bought a distressed asset. It's a natural gas field. And so he hedges, right? So he sells the natural gas, but he does have pipeline infrastructure going out to him, but it costs money to actually get your gas into the pipeline. So sometimes if the cost of gas is not very high, then sometimes it's just worth it to take it and mine Bitcoin with it. So he mines Bitcoin already because that's why he bought it. He likes Bitcoin, but he has this hedge. So if the price of natural gas is going up, he may sell more to the pipeline, But if the price is really low, then he's going to do more Bitcoin mining and basically store that energy into a digital asset. And so that's why I say that everywhere that there's power, it's helpful to think about, is there a way that Bitcoin mining can provide a service to you, and actually a service to the whole society? Because as we said before, a flourishing economy is dependent on cheap energy. And so the more that you give these producers solutions, if there's way too much gas to go around, mine Bitcoin with it. But then you haven't gone offline. And so then when the day comes, then, oh my goodness, we need some natural gas. You're there and you're ready to redirect and provide it. So that's what I see in answer to your question. I think Bitcoin mining provides an elegant, unique, creative solution to assist for many different scenarios of power generation.
Love that. Yeah, that synergy is just beautiful. And as you were speaking, and as we've been having this discussion today, Bitcoin mining is so symbolic of saving. And that key element that we spoke about with Bitcoin itself, how it encourages long-termism, and while fiat currency, on the other hand, causes a short-termism and wanting you to consume everything immediately. And it's the same thing in the energy world. It's Bitcoin mining and allows you to store that energy, to save it for that rainy day when you do need it, when you have those energy demands. And instead of having blackouts, you have that seamlessly. So once again, Bitcoin mining encourages the long-termism and saving. So just so much needed. Excellent points there. I love that. So
well, and also one last thing about that, just
Please.
Conserving the assets that we have. So recently in Scandinavia, I can't remember which country, but they created a new nuclear facility. And nuclear is fascinating because it is carbon neutral, right? But it is dispatchable, so it's always there. But remember when I was talking earlier about how a grid has to be stable at 60 hertz. So the problem that they were experiencing is they had so much wind there built out that when the wind came through, they ended up having to shut down their nuclear plant in order to keep stability. But the problem is nuclear is not made to turn on and off like that. So you have a brand new asset for nuclear power and you're damaging it because you're having to turn it off. And so wouldn't using that wind for Bitcoin mining, right? Take it off the grid and use it for mining and just bring it on the grid when there's a need, be a better way of conserving the assets that you have as we go into a time where, as you said, commodities are going, there's a good chance, because we need power, that commodities are going to be more and more precious.
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah, the secular bull market in commodities looks pretty much likely, but excellent points there regarding the grid. And, it's so difficult. I mean, I wouldn't want to be shutting down the nuclear reactors myself. It's not made for that. And that's a great point that you mentioned. While Bitcoin mining is so easy, it's just new technology, this forward thinking, much needed during these times, and I'm sure will further be embraced as well. Now, you talk about private equity investing, and I want to go into the Bitcoin business. It seems that businesses are going to be, Bitcoin's going to be part of every business and in the future. So tell us how you foresee businesses becoming Bitcoin businesses, and how businesses can transform their current structures.
I think it's important for all businesses to think about integrating Bitcoin into their business. Just for one thing, the customer base, right? Especially if you're an international business, it's a lot easier to receive Bitcoin than it is, let's say you have customers across the world, or maybe you're paying employees across the world. It's so frictionless to get that that value back and forth compared to, going through the banking system. Obviously, we have to do that legally and, whatever, but the tax is being paid. But just from a basic standpoint, it's a lot easier to receive. Also, we were talking earlier about circular economies, local economies. I have a good friend, you may know him, Texas Slim, and he has been going around the world helping beef farmers learn about Bitcoin, and also creating events to bring people to meet their ranchers so that they can purchase beef with Bitcoin, and you cut out the middleman again. And so it's supporting the local economy, where they can just go right to the purchaser. And so that kind of forward-looking thinking is what I think is so needed, especially since I think we're kind of at the later stages of this mass globalization, right? Where all our supply chains are across the world. But as power prices increase and, rumors of wars, what's going to happen if some of those pipelines are shut down? We need to be thinking about local, and Bitcoin offers a beautiful, elegant solution to be able to receive, and for us to, be able to support our local communities, especially also with, concern about central bank digital currencies and the idea of picking the winners and losers, right? With those currencies, you're going to be able to say what you can buy and what you can't buy. And so maybe they don't want us eating so much beef. Maybe they want us eating more bugs. That's what they say they want. And can they then punish you for that kind of purchase? So Bitcoin is just outside of that whole centralized decision makers system. So it's important to think about in that regard. What else? Bitcoin business. When I started Noah's Bitcoin, I wanted to be in the Bitcoin space. And so I was like, well, I'm an educator, I'll teach about it. One of the challenges with Bitcoin, which is one of the things that's so beautiful about it, people are always looking for yield and ways to kind of become a middleman. And Bitcoin kind of rejects that. And so there's another sense to it where there's not a lot of, we're not in it to get rich from Bitcoin, right? So it's not a pump and dump scheme. It's considered a commodity. And so you can't, you can't just dump your bags on everybody and get rich quick that way, which is why we love it, right? It's too decentralized for that. And so there's another sense in which the best way to get involved in Bitcoin is just work your job and slowly dollar cost average in, rather than, trying to, I think what we saw with BlockFi and Celsius and a lot of those Bitcoin businesses, crypto businesses, they to make it what it wasn't, which was a yield-bearing asset, right? So they were trying to turn it into this fractional reserve system, and it blew up. And I had the great joy of listening to Peter McCormack's debate with Jeff Booth and George Gammon, both of whom I really respect. I love both of them, right? And but Jeff was making the point that what happened with BlockFi and Celsius is always going to happen. You're not really going to be able to turn this into a fractional reserve asset if you lend out at this rate, but then you got to pay it back when it's worth so much more. Are you going to have some of the same issues? So I say that just because when you ask the question about a Bitcoin business, there's two ways to understand that. And, in the strict sense of how do I make money being in the Bitcoin space, it's not as easy to do. And a lot of it is just, there's bridges with the financial, giving people exposure to the asset, but it of its nature, it kind of rejects the get rich quick scheme aspect of, say, more of the blockchain space, right? Which is a good thing. But more generally, I think everyone needs to think about being a Bitcoin business in the sense of being familiar with it, maybe being able to receive it. There's a great app called the Oshi app where you can look and find out which businesses are taking Bitcoin. and in so doing, maybe bring about greater financial inclusion for people that then have access to your business.
Great
Does that make
points.
sense?
Absolutely. Great points that you raised there, because like you said, the premise of Bitcoin is not a get rich quick, immediate, double, triple your money. It's not a zero-sum game. It's more of a cooperative abundance mindset based on stability and opening up borders for all and elevating humanity. And that's the people I've met in the network have been just wonderful. And everyone's working together to better, humanity. And so well said. I love that. And, I remember back in high school, many moons ago, there was a bumper sticker that said, think global, act local. And so it's so important to go directly to the source. Great example with the farmer and buying your beef. Texas Slim sounds amazing. I don't know him, but now I do, and I will look him up. But that sounds wonderful, going directly to the source and having a uniform currency that is unincorruptible. Then you could pay with the Bitcoin, and that's just wonderful. And yes, saying no to CBDCs, we don't need any more control. And that's their focus, is to tell us what to do and how money is spent. And they can do it very easily by just shutting it off and restricting transactions. So we want freedom. The whole core of Bitcoin is freedom. And so, and we maintain, right? Exactly. And that's the premise here, is freedom and truth and hope for the future. So I want to talk about investments and, investing in Bitcoin, digital assets, blockchain. How do you evaluate opportunities in this space?
So one of the main questions regarding Bitcoin versus Bitcoin mining that you have to ask, because this is something that comes up for our investors a lot, is it better to just purchase the asset rather than invest in the infrastructure? And all of that comes down to, all else being equal, your cost of power. You really kind of want to stay below 5 cents a kilowatt hour if you can, in order to be profitable. But the nice thing about investing in the infrastructure is you're investing in an energy infrastructure, and there's tax depreciation with oil field equipment. You end up basically dollar cost averaging in at hopefully a price that's below spot. And so you got to kind of look at your own situation. But I usually tell people, think about getting off zero and just buy in slowly, dollar cost average. Don't worry about trying to time the market. You can get really burned that way, but just slowly buy in, not more than you can afford. And people tend to do better when they just dollar cost average in. And then if you're investing in the infrastructure, the mining, it does act a bit, if it's Bitcoin denominated, it does act as a dollar cost average, because we're mining every day. Regarding the broader space, because I am a financial advisor and I have my license, the SEC has been signaling that they consider everything that's not Bitcoin to be an unregistered security, even Ethereum. They've gone back and forth about Ethereum, but I think it's important to note that. And the reason that they make is because Bitcoin is so decentralized. There's no central authority you could call up and get them to come in and register. And you can't dump your bags and move the market in the same way in Bitcoin, because it's so spread out. And so they like to consider it as a commodity, whereas everything else has a team that makes or breaks it. And that team may own a huge percentage of that project. And so will blockchain technology continue to be used in the future? I think so. Not for everything. Not everything needs a decentralized supercomputer, right? Sometimes centralization is much more streamlined. I suspect there will be a few projects that make it, but I think most of the others will probably go to nothing. And what we've seen in the past Bitcoin cycles is the ones that were around in the last, top, then we have like these 4-year cycles, and then the next one, it's new ones. So I tend to caution against the others. I think of them more as gambling. They have more of a regulatory risk. I think what happens if one of those projects is considered an unregistered security? What happens when you try to sell it? So that's just kind of my official position on all things not Bitcoin. And then, a lot of people are looking at NVIDIA and AI and kind of rushing into that. But there's always the danger, right? When there's a whole lot of FOMO around a particular thing, you really have to watch the blow off tops. And so for me personally, if we're talking about digital assets, I am a Bitcoin only advocate as far as investment. And again, with the proper caveats of know your risk tolerance, go in slowly, don't try and time the markets. I wouldn't recommend. That's kind of where I stand on all of that.
Awesome. Excellent points. Thank you so much for your valuable insights. This has been absolutely wonderful and so enlightening. So please tell our audience, Kristine, how they can follow your work.
Absolutely. So I think the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, Kristine Cranely. I'm also on Twitter, Kristine Cranely, Kristine with a K. And those are my favorite ways to kind of keep people updated about what I'm up to.
Thank you so much for all the work you do in educating everyone on Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. And I think you've educated us all today. So thank you so much. I look forward to meeting you in person, hopefully in the near future.
Same. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure meeting you and all your audience.
Thank you.